Hey, what's going on guys? Welcome back to another Eidolon Hunting video. Today's video is going to be going over Octavia, her role in the fight, and my Octavia build. Octavia is used in the same role that both Chroma and Rhino are used in, which is the DPS role. And her total damage is somewhere in between the two. Honestly, the biggest difference between playing Octavia and playing one of the other two is that Octavia is much squishier and can die a lot easier, which I learned the hard way while I was testing out the build. But overall, she's really not a bad option for a DPS if you want to play Octavia during the hunt. And before I get into the build, I want to talk about her relevant abilities. We're not going to be using her 1 or 2 during the Eidolon hunt. And her 3 has a little bit of utility that I'll talk about in a second, but I want to start with her 4 since that's what we're using to get more damage. Upon using Octavia's 4 amp, she throws out a little ball that creates an area filled with little music bars that looks like this. And you'll see as soon as I cast it, I already have the damage buff while I'm standing inside of the area. However, in order to scale Octavia's amp's damage buff to the maximum, you need to be creating noise in the area where it's thrown. So you can see as I shoot my Sicarus, the damage buff goes from 400 to 600. While testing this in the simulacrum, it's more of an issue, but during the Eidolon hunt, you're going to have plenty of sound around to keep that buff maxed out. But I wanted you guys to know how that worked anyways. And because the damage boost only applies to you while you're inside of the area, unlike Chroma or Rhino that can take their buff with them, I find having positive range on my amp very important for the Eidolon hunt. Because you don't want to be outside of the area shooting the Eidolon. Trust me, the loss in damage is painful. And Octavia's amp's damage buff works the same way that Chroma does. Meaning that while playing Octavia, we're going to want to use as much elemental damage as possible. And in case you guys want to figure out the damage for yourselves, or if you have a ribbon where you want to see what the best mod combo is, you can use this formula. All you do is you take the weapon's base damage, multiply that by 1 plus base damage mods, plus Octavia's buff, which is 2 times whatever your power strength is. In this case, my power strength is 323, which gives me 6.46, which is my maxed out Octavia buff. And then you take all that and multiply it by 1 plus your elemental damage mods. This formula will give you the damage for a single pellet before crit multiplier. If you have any questions about this, please leave a comment below. But basically all this means is that we're going to be using elemental damage mods instead of mods like Serration or Heavy Caliber on our weapon. The next ability I want to talk about is Octavia's 3 Metronome. If you've played Octavia before, then you'll probably think of this as the ability that allows you to become invisible. But Metronome has a few different buffs that you can gain from it. Here we're just going to focus on 2 of them. The first and most obvious is going to be the Metronome buff as soon as you activate the skill. What this does is it gives you a percent of armor based on your power strength. With this build here, I get 113% extra armor. And because Octavia is very squishy like I mentioned earlier, having extra armor is going to be pretty beneficial. The next buff I want to talk about is the Opera buff. This is the one that gives you extra multi-shot as long as you shoot along with the beat. So while you have your Metronome active and you're shooting along with the beat, you can build up your Opera buff to 100% total, at which point it'll give you the multi-shot. This can be pretty hard during the Eidolons, and I'm just mentioning it because it will give you more damage. So if you want to try it, you can. I just didn't find it a consistent way to get damage. The best way to proc this during the fight is when the Eidolon's invulnerable and you're shooting to get extra sniper combo. Although as you guys may have noticed, I have almost no duration on this build. So my Metronome only lasts for 13 seconds. Which I don't really find too useful during the Eidolons. Although if you want to build for more duration, these buffs could be beneficial to you, and I wanted to make sure I mentioned them in the video. The last ability I want to talk about is Octavia's passive Inspiration. Inspiration activates every time you cast an ability, which will even count when you use Transference. Inspiration works very similar to Energizing Dash if you're familiar with the Zeneric Focus School. Every time it's activated, you'll provide yourself and your allies with 1 energy a second over 30 seconds. This effect will also apply to operators, so it will allow your team to stay in void mode easier, which will help out your Madurai players during the fight. And while Inspiration isn't going to make or break your Eidolon hunt, it's a beneficial buff that you're going to passively trigger anyways. Overall, in terms of Octavia's abilities, I'd really say her amp is the most important one to focus on for the Eidolon hunts. Although, like I mentioned, you can build for Metronome, but personally, I didn't enjoy trying to use it during the Eidolon hunt. And now that I've given you guys a brief overview of how she works, let's take a look at how I built her. For my Octavia build, I'm focusing on power strength and a little bit of efficiency. After that, it's really up to you. Like I mentioned, you can build for duration if you want to, but I didn't find it was that useful and I really wanted as much power strength as I could get. So to get that power strength, I just gone for all the mods. Intensify, Transient Fortitude, Augur Secrets, Blind Rage, and Power Drift. Having all these mods will at max give me a 646% increased damage buff from Octavia. After that, I've gone for efficiency with Streamline and Fleeting Expertise, and then to ensure my duration isn't too negative, I'm running Prime Continuity here. This puts my amp's duration at 20 seconds, which is enough to pop a limb, because every time I want to shoot, I'm going to be putting down a new amp, which means that I'm fine with a shorter duration, but I don't want it to be too short, and I find 20 seconds to be just enough time. And for my survivability here, I'm just running Vitality. Honestly, I even debated putting in Steel Fiber since I have a D polarity. Octavia is just super squishy, and you're probably going to die with her regardless. It's not really that much of an issue since reviving just resets your sniper combo, but if you're not playing her in an organized group, you're probably going to have a really hard time. Even when I was recording the gameplay I'm going to show in a second, I had trouble surviving with a full party. And finally, for my aura here, I'm running Enemy Radar, but you could also swap in either Deadeye or Corrosive Projection. As for the arcanes, right now I just have nullifiers in because, as always, they're the most idiot-proof arcanes you can use. But for Octavia, I think you're really going to want something like an Arcane Guardian that's going to increase your survivability. Getting a Guardian proc for 600 armor is going to greatly increase how easy it is to survive on Octavia. However, the problem here is that you're going to be relying on your teammates to ignore those magnetic procs, which means that if someone makes a mistake and you get hit with one, you're going to lose energy, which can be very annoying. And to combat either losing health or energy, I'd really recommend bringing restore pads with you. Octavia is one of the few Warframes where I found myself using the restore pads to keep my health up. But again, how you build her is up to you. Here I'm just trying to provide a solid template to help you guys build for the Eidolons. I'll also give you guys a brief look at my Manticore. As you'll see, I have all the nodes taken, and it's muted. This isn't a Manticore video, so if you guys want to build your own, then there are plenty of good videos for that, but this is not one of them. I just have this because it's really generic and easy to use. And as for the weapons I'm using, I'm running an elemental damage Lanka build, because remember, mods like Heavy Caliber or Serration are going to be less effective due to how Octavia's amp works. I also have a Sicarus here, as well as a Sarpa. I'm recommending the Sarpa here because stripping the armor is very important for Octavia, just like it's important for Chroma. And if you're not running in an organized squad, having a Sarpa can really help you increase your overall damage. But if you're running with a full squad with Corrosive Projections, you can swap this out for something like a Whip to help deal with Bomb Ballists. And then finally here, I'm running an Adarza with the Cat's Eye buff. As for your focus school, just like with Rhino or Chroma, you want to be running the Unara Wisp, which will help boost your teammates' damage to the Eidolon shields. But now that I've gone over the build, let's look at some gameplay. The one thing I will mention going into this is that I was using my Riven while recording this footage, which I usually don't do for these videos, but it will give a good example of how one-shotting works with Octavia. And speaking of one-shotting, I just wanted to cover what all goes into actually one-shotting the Eidolon, because it's not just going to be one factor that allows you to one-shot the Eidolon or its limbs. There's many different factors that will go into it, like are you using a Riven? Is the Eidolon's armor stripped? How high is your sniper combo? How much power strength do you have in your build? Are you receiving any buffs from like a Volt or an Oberon? And whether or not you're shooting through a Volt shield. You're going to need some combination of these to efficiently kill the Eidolons in one hit. And I feel like I haven't really gone into that well enough in my other videos, so I wanted to mention that here. And maybe I'll make another video going over all the damage buffs you might want for the Eidolons. But for the footage you're watching right now, I was just using Octavia with my Riven, the Hero buff, as well as a 2x+ sniper combo. With that I was able to one-shot the Eidolon's limbs very easily. And when it came to the Eidolon itself, I was either using a Volt buff or Volt shields. The one thing you really want to watch out for while you're playing Octavia is where you're throwing your amp. I've made the mistake of throwing the ball too far out and not getting the buff, so it's important to watch out where you're throwing it and how far away it's going to land. Because if you're not in the amp's area, killing the Eidolon is going to be real tough. And if you're not moving quickly in an organized group like this, you might want to spend more time in your operator form as Octavia, because that's going to be one of the best ways to actually avoid some of the Eidolon damage. And while I wasn't using Arcane Guardians in this footage, I do think that they're greatly beneficial to Octavia, and probably outweigh the possibility of losing some energy to a magnetic proc. But hopefully this gameplay at least shows you what to do with Octavia. You make sure you put down the Unara Wisp while the Eidolon's energy spike is going out, and then for this run I was putting down the amp almost as soon as I transferred back to my Warframe. With the 20-second duration on the amp, I was able to position properly for the next hit. And because my team was taking down the shields almost immediately, it made it much easier for me to position properly. Overall, I'd say Octavia is a pretty decent choice for a DPS during the Eidolon hunts, although I would recommend bringing her with a full group, because her lack of survivability can be really frustrating, and other Warframes like Chroma or Rhino won't suffer from that problem. And with an organized team, the survivability becomes less of an issue. But hopefully this video has at least given you an idea of how to build and play Octavia for the Eidolon hunts. If you did find the video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you leave a like. And if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. And if you haven't yet, join the Discord. There's a pretty decent group of people who run Eidolon hunts, and if you see me around, I'm usually down to do one. But that's it for me, guys. Hope you all have a good one, and I'll see you later.